Welcome to Relation Tales. Please like this video and subscribe Relation Tales. When I came to the office on Monday, Dan said, "Do you want to relax for a couple of days in Florida?" Elliot Rogers seems to need a little bit of support given all the upheaval over the last couple of months. Since Dan and I were co-owners of our company, we usually no longer went to clients. We needed young, impatient subordinates for this. But Elliot Rogers and his wife have worked for us for more than 15 years and invested almost $100 million, so they were given special attention. I don't mind. It's actually a great time for me. The kids are away at college, and Carrie went to stay with a friend in Nashville for a week. So, I decided to go visit my Uncle Tony. He's almost 80 years old and lives by a beautiful river an hour north of Miami. He's always been an interesting person. I packed a bag for a couple of days, went to the airport, and by 3:30 I was already sitting with Tony on his balcony, drinking beer and listening to his familiar stories from my childhood. Whenever a boat passed by, he would pause and grab the binoculars. "Are you going to finish this story or what, Tony? The guy in the bar attacked you." He grinned without taking the binoculars from his eyes. "Hold on, my young friend. At my age, a guy doesn't get to see bare breasts that often." He handed me the binoculars, and to my amazement, I saw 3 teenage girls and a guy waving from a small sailboat. All the girls were grinning and topless. Tony took the binoculars back. "Do you see what I mean?" He chuckled with satisfaction. We talked about our family, and had a few more beers until I started thinking about dinner, maybe getting some steaks at Tony's favorite place nearby. Tony picked up the binoculars again, looked at a pale blue boat, and focused carefully. Then he said, "Wow," and handed me the binoculars. It was a small boat called my Blue Angel, drifting gently with the current. On board, there was a guy around 30 years old lying on the cushions in the cockpit, with a woman straddling him. She was vigorously riding him, tossing her head back and moving her breasts energetically. On her right shoulder, there was a large tattoo in the shape of a Chinese character. You might wonder why I noticed the boat's name or the tattoo on a naked woman. It's simple to explain. It was my wife, Carrie. Without saying anything, I handed the binoculars back to my uncle and listened to his comments until the couple disappeared from view. When they were gone, he lowered the binoculars and said, "What a sight it was. I see couples doing it from time to time, Jack, but I'll tell you, that lady was hot. If I were 20 years younger, more like 50, I would say." I smiled at him. I was very upset, but I wasn't going to talk about it with Tony. We went to get our steaks, after which I brought Tony home and he went to bed. I was in my hotel room by 9:30, and I had a lot to think about. You might think that I would have been destroyed, but that wasn't the case. Carrie and I have been married for about 12 years. She was a great stepmother to my 2 children. My first wife died in a train accident, and a very good wife to me. I loved and appreciated her, and I knew that she loved me. And yet, somehow, it didn't shock me that she was cheating on me. Carrie has always been a restless person. She never liked doing one thing for a long time. During our marriage, she had 5 different jobs. She had a variety of hobbies, from knitting to country dancing and horseback riding, and she just never wanted to sit still. Carrie and I had a sex life that pleased me. Of course, she was no less interested in it than I was. And without any problems, from time to time, she grabbed my organ and dragged me into the bedroom. Sometimes we made tender, even ordinary love between older people in marriage, but sometimes it satisfied the hell out of me. Actually, I thought about how one of Carrie's favorite ways to have sex was similar to what I saw on the boat. She enjoys being in control, even in public places. Carrie has tried a few times to have sex with me in public, like on a park bench or in the back seat of my car. But I stopped doing it. I didn't want our private life to become public. Honestly, I wasn't heartbroken. I was angry and hurt, but I didn't think our marriage had to end because of this. I didn't think Carrie meant to embarrass me. She didn't know where Uncle Tony lived, and she didn't think I would be at the river that day. But 2 things were clear to me. I was going to find out a lot more about what was going on, and I was going to satisfy Stephanie Prince. For this, I called Marjorie Bales in Nashville, where Carrie was supposed to spend a week. She seemed surprised by my call and a little wary. "I'm sorry to bother you, Marjorie, but Carrie's cell phone doesn't seem to be working and I can't get through. Could you call her for a minute?" "Oh, I'm sorry, Jack, she's in the shower. Can I ask her to call you back?" We talked on the phone and I smiled to myself. As I expected, Marjorie was covering for her old friend. I was wondering how many of Carrie's previous trips to Nashville were actually vacations with one friend or another. Carrie called me on my cell phone about 45 minutes later, quite a long shower, and we had a friendly chat. I told her I was on my way to meet a client, but I didn't mention where I was. Before we hung up, she said she loved me, missed me, and would see me on Saturday. The thing is, I believed her. She really loved me. I didn't think that the affair was intended to get out of our marriage or outmaneuver me. I assumed that my troubled wife was just not well suited for a monogamous life. After meeting with Elliot Rogers the next morning, I spent half an hour with Thomas Giardino, a private investigator. I told him all about the short-haired guy from My Blue Angel, gave him a copy of my wife's photo, and left him a solid check. There's no need to break in on them, I told him, and I don't need compromising photos. Just carefully find out what's the matter. Did she stay with him, or was it a chance meeting? Who is this guy? Where is he from? And what does he do for a living? I want to try to find out how they met, and how long they've been doing this. Before I boarded the plane back to Charlotte, I called Stephanie Prince. Hi, this is the man of your dreams. Are you free for dinner tonight? Yes, I'm serious. Carrie's out of town and I want to take you out to dinner. How do you like Fig Tree? Fantasy. I'll come get you at 8. And listen, wear something that shows off your amazing body. I want every guy in the restaurant to envy me tonight. I laughed and hung up. Then he called the Fig Tree and booked a table. Stephanie Prince, a tall, attractive redhead in her early 30s, lived just 3 blocks away from Carrie and me. She worked in real estate, knew almost everyone in the city, dated a lot, and for some reason, she seemed interested in me, even though I was just an average guy in my 40s. After meeting at a few neighborhood parties, she made me a serious offer. We were having lunch downtown and she said, Jack, would you do me a favor? Of course, I replied. Tell me the name. Lately, I've been going through a hell of a hard time. Could you take a couple of hours off today and powder my brains? When I finished lifting my jaw off the table, we talked about it. If I had considered cheating on my wife with anyone, it would have been Stephanie. And I told her about it. But I took my marriage vows seriously. I know you're happily married, Jack, and I'm not trying to separate you from Carrie. I'm not looking for a husband or even a magical romance. I love making love, and I like you. If you want to lie on the bed with me once or several times, just say the word. I let her go, but I didn't thank her for the flattering offer, and I didn't forget about it either, although it wasn't until I saw Carrie jumping on that guy's male organ that I thought I'd do something about it someday. The steelhead trout in the Fig Tree was the best I've ever tasted, but it paled in comparison to my night in Stephanie Prince's bed. Based on the time spent with an organ in her mouth or in her hot crotch, I have to say that extramarital love, even with condoms, is as amazing as people talk about it. She was passionate, experienced, and tireless. I still don't know why she finds me attractive, but she fucking loved satisfying me until I couldn't get up anymore. And at least part of the time, Carrie didn't get out of my head. Although when Stephanie rode me like a galloping bronco and pulled my hands to squeeze her beautiful breasts, I couldn't help but think about what I'd seen the day before on the Blue Angel. The dinner was surprisingly serious. We flirted, of course, and Stephanie kept hinting at her plans for me after dessert, but we also really talked. She's so attractive that it's easy to overlook how thoughtful and intelligent Stephanie is, but our conversation reminded me of that. It wasn't long before she asked the $64,000 question, right after we placed the order. Okay, Jack, spit it out. I'm glad you called, but what's going on? I smiled. Can't I have an elegant dinner with the most beautiful woman I know? What about Carrie? Yes, she's attractive too, but, I said. Stephanie slapped my hand, smiling. Very funny. Really, what's the matter? You've been keeping your distance since I showed interest a couple of years ago, so why today? I told her what I had seen in Florida, and how I felt about it. It sucks. She said, I'm sorry, Jack, and I could tell she meant it. Most of the dinner was spent discussing marriage, cheating, and trust. Stephanie had been divorced twice from attractive guys who cheated on her, so she understood. While having coffee, she asked, so, what are you going to do? I smiled and said, for now, I'll take you home and hope you invite me in. She gave a half smile and lightly touched her foot to mine under the table. After that, I'm not sure. I believe Carrie and I can work through this. Maybe. I need to know how serious this affair of hers is, and I have a boyfriend who is studying it. But you know what? I think it's time to stop talking about Carrie. I signaled for the check. 5 minutes later, we walked hand in hand to the car. 20 minutes after that, we were already lounging on her couch, and a little later we were naked in Stephanie's bedroom. Over the next few days, the smile on my face from the amazing night with Stephanie came and went, alternating with dark thoughts about Carrie and the future of our marriage. People at work must have noticed something, because on Thursday Dan came into my office closing the door behind him and asked, what? Sighing, I told him the story. What are you going to do? He asked. Ask me next week, I said. It depends on what the private investigator finds and what Carrie says. She'll be back Saturday night, so we'll see. I spent Thursday night with Stephanie, and it was just as hot as the first time. I brought Chinese takeout, and we fed each other in bed when we weren't satisfied or licking each other. You know what? I told her around midnight, when we were sleepily watching Letterman. I'm really having a good time. And this is a surprise for you, you idiot. She laughed. No, that's not what I'm talking about. I kissed her. Making love to you is just fabulous. Stephanie, I'm serious. You're an amazing lover. But you turned me on so much that it took me a while to notice how much fun I had when we weren't making love. Just talking to you, laughing, watching you drip Kung Pao chicken on those amazing breasts. I bent down and licked her nipple, enjoying her trembling. I can't believe no one has bought you yet. You deserve better than that. Well, than me, to be honest. She turned off the TV and pulled me to her for a kiss. You're sweet, Jack. And I had a great time, too. But don't underestimate yourself. You're more valuable than you realize. And if Carrie doesn't wise up, there will be plenty of women eager to make you feel better, including you. I asked. She avoided eye contact. I'm not sure. I've almost accepted that I'm not one for settling down. But let's just say I'm not sure and leave it at that. We left things as they were, both understanding that the situation had gotten serious. Holding each other, we kissed a bit more and drifted off to sleep. The next morning, Stephanie was cheerful and lighthearted. We took a shower together, joked at breakfast, and went our separate ways. Thomas Giardino, a private investigator from Florida, sent me an email on Friday afternoon. Here are our preliminary results. Please read and study the attached files, and then call my office. I'll be there until 6 p.m. I read the report, looked at half a dozen photos, then called and talked to Giardino for about 20 minutes. The owner of the Blue Angel was a 34-year-old guy named Roger Dion. He was the vice president of sales for a drug supply company, and, according to his neighbors, something of a lover of married women. He almost always had a woman at home. She splashed in the pool, sunbathed on the deck, or even moaned and screamed in his bedroom. And women never stayed long. Dion obviously loved variety, not monogamy. The private investigator's photos included several shots of Carrie and Dion together, getting out of a BMW in his driveway, and in one, they were eating together at a table in the back of the house. There was no lovemaking on any of them, although it was obvious that she lived with him. Several people from Dion's entourage recognized Carrie from the photo I provided, but no one could remember if they had seen her before this week. So what could I conclude? First, Dion was most likely Carrie's short-term boyfriend, or at least a recent acquisition. They probably met through work, since Carrie worked in the purchasing department of a hospital in Charlotte and constantly dealt with drug supply companies and their managers. Whether she planned to date him after this week was impossible to say, but he didn't look like a second husband, since Carrie has been visiting her friend Marjorie about once a year in the last few years. It's possible that my wife had affairs with other men besides Roger. She was very careful, and I wouldn't have known if it wasn't for an accident and Uncle Tony's binoculars. I still have a few questions, but not many. The main thing I'm thinking about is, what should I do now? Babe, I missed you, Carrie said casually as she kissed me and hugged me tightly. I kissed her back, then took her suitcase, and we went to the airport parking lot while she held my hand tightly. I hope you have a bottle of champagne for us, since both Carrie and I traveled sometimes for work, or in her case, to visit my friend Marjorie in Nashville. We got into the habit of celebrating our reunions with champagne in bed, followed by a hot lovemaking. Tonight was no exception. She took a quick shower while I unloaded her bags and got out the champagne, and we spent the next couple of hours playing in bed. She looked happy and excited as always, but for me it was different. Fun, physically satisfying, but a little empty. When we finished, she snuggled up to me, kissed me on the neck, said, "Thank you, baby, I love you," and fell asleep a few minutes later. When Carrie came into the kitchen on Sunday morning in her bathrobe and with a sleepy smile, I had already made coffee and was just serving scrambled eggs and toast. She hugged me, smiling, then accepted a cup of coffee. We ate in silence. Carrie looked at me affectionately, squeezing my hand from time to time, and I just sat and watched. After the second cup, when she began to recover, Carrie said, "That was pretty sweet last night, baby. The best part of being away is always coming back when you remind me of what I've been missing." She smiled at me lovingly. I liked it, but it didn't stop me from saying what I've been waiting for so long. "Do you think I should have used a condom, Carrie? I mean, since you made love to Roger Don, do you think we're safe?" The smile froze on her face. "Jack, what did you say?" I waited, letting the silence grow. Her face turned very pale and she couldn't hold my gaze. "Roger," I said. "A guy in Florida with a boat. Don't play dumb, honey, it doesn't suit you. Did you use condoms with him? And what about the other guys you've made love to? I think there were at least 5 or 6 of them. Have you been a good girl and practiced safe lovemaking?" Carrie started crying. "Jack, I am. It's not a what? Oh my God, baby, I'm so sorry, I didn't. Oh my God." She buried her face in her hands, crying even harder. When she looked up at me, her face was stained with tears. I just stared back. Baby, Jack, I know that oh my God. I know I did something terrible, but how did you know? Silence. I wasn't going to answer that question. She looked at me and recoiled from everything she saw. Now she was crying harder, blowing her nose into a napkin. I got up from the table. I'm going to take a shower. When I came back to the kitchen 30 minutes later, shaved and dressed, Carrie was still sitting at the table. She had already cleaned up the dishes and washed her face. Honey, I know I owe you an explanation. I messed up, and I love you so much I just can't. I'm sorry, Carrie, I said. Not now. I have to be at Stephanie Prince's house. I think I'll be back for dinner. Then we can talk. Stephanie Prince. Her sad expression turned puzzled. Yes, do you remember Stephanie, the real estate agent? Tall with red hair. It turns out she really likes me. It feels like we've known each other for 10 years. You know what I mean. Carrie's face looked shocked. Stephanie, are you sleeping with her? Well, when I found out that our marriage wasn't what I thought it was, I accepted her offer. We made love, yes, so see you at dinner. Stephanie really did everything in beauty. Although I would not say that everything was better than with Carrie. That day in Stephanie's bed, I left what I thought was a pretty good opinion of myself, considering what I had been doing with Carrie the night before. Then we lay down for a while, ate sandwiches, and watched the Carolina Panthers. Around 6 I got up to take a shower, enjoying the sounds from the bedroom, where Stephanie was yelling at the judges to throw the damn flag at least once in a while. When I came out, she said, we could order Chinese food again, or pizza or something. I smiled. I'm sorry, but I can't do it today. I told Carrie I'd be home for dinner. Stephanie sat up straight, giving me a wonderful view of her beautiful breasts. What the hell is that? You mean she's back and you're here? Does she know? Yes, she came home last night. I told her everything this morning. About her boyfriend, and she knows exactly where I am. Although I don't think she likes it very much. A slow smile appeared on Stephanie's face. You're a tough guy, aren't you? She got out of bed, pulled on her nightgown, and came over to hug me. So what does it mean? She muttered. About us. I looked at her. To be honest, I do not know. There aren't many alternatives, and after tonight I'll know a lot more. I could get a divorce, and then you'll be my top priority, I told her with a smile. Or maybe Carrie and I could have an open marriage, considering what she's been up to. In that case, you'd still be my top priority. Or perhaps we'll figure things out and go back to how I thought we were all this time. Stephanie patted my shoulders and looked at me thoughtfully. I really like you, Jack. In and out of bed, actually. But I don't think I should be stuck in the middle of your marriage. That's not what I signed up for when we started this. I kissed her. I understand. We need to deal with Carrie first. After that, we'll see. But I definitely wouldn't give up more than what we've been doing, Steph. Catching her off guard, I grabbed her ass and lifted her in my arms. Squealing, she wrapped her legs around my waist and hugged me, giggling as I kissed her hard again. It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. When I entered the house, soft music was playing, Vivaldi or something like that. I looked into the dining room and saw a table set for 2, with serving mats, beautiful napkins, and 2 tall candles. Before I could go to look for Carrie, she came in from the kitchen with fried chicken in a large frying pan. She wore one of her beautiful dresses, much more chic than usual for a quiet dinner at home on the weekend. There you are, she said in a voice full of mock amusement. Dinner is ready, so sit down. A moment later, she returned from the kitchen with 2 more dishes, rice pilaf and spinach. When I sat down, she took out a bottle of good white wine from the refrigerator, which we both love, and poured us each a glass. We drank a glass of wine in silence, and ate our dinner without much conversation. There was some talk about innocent things, the latest news from the kids, what happened at my job, but there was too much left unsaid, too many topics that needed to be avoided. It was stressful, and she obviously enjoyed it a lot less than I did. When she cleared the table and brought me a beautiful apple pie, I suddenly had enough. All day, indeed, all week, I had thoughts spinning in my head. Is it possible to save my marriage? Do I want to save him? Would it be as good for me if I became a single guy again? Is there a possible future with Stephanie? And I realized that at least at that moment, everything depended on what Carrie would say. It depends on what her story will be and how she tells it. So Carrie, shall we get down to business? What comes first? Shall we talk about my day with Stephanie? Or your week with Roger Dion? Which of us made love more? How many other lovers or bedroom friends or whatever you call them have spread your legs? Will we have an open marriage or no marriage at all? Where would you like to start? I caught her off guard. She was staring at me, her face pale, her mouth open. Then she began to cry softly. Jack, I'm a terrible person, she said softly, tears running down her face onto the table. I'm selfish, immature, and I lie a lot. She looked up at me. You know, before you, I've never been in a relationship that lasted even a year. I've always felt restless or moody, never satisfied with what I had. But when we met and fell in love, and you proposed to me, I was so happy, so grateful. I felt like I finally found the right guy, someone I could love forever. No more worrying. No more worrying about what else or who else is in the world. There is only one person who has made me so happy. Now I was the only one who was surprised. No evasions, no attempts to downplay what she had done, even though I didn't know all that yet. It wasn't what I expected. And I was, she continued, happy, with you, with us, even with the fact that I became a stepmother to the children. She looked at me. I can't tell you how happy I feel when I think about it, but that didn't stop me from continuing to be selfish, spoiled, cheating. And I know I ruined everything and I don't even know what. At that moment, she was completely speechless, sobbing convulsively, covering her face with her hands. I waited for her to cry. Part of me wanted to comfort her, hug her, but most of me wanted her to feel what she was feeling. Loneliness, guilt, fear. She made me feel like shit, and I wanted her to feel like shit. It's probably not very noble, but who can blame me? After a few minutes, she began to calm down, catch her breath. Why don't you go wash up and we can sit on deck and talk? I said. When we sat down, I asked, can you imagine what will happen next? She shook her head, looking worried, and I said, actually, me too. But we'll start by telling me about it. Not the disgusting details, but who, how much, where, and when. And damn it, Carrie, if you lie to me even once, even for some little reason, I'll kick your fucking ass out of this house. All right, she said thinly. There were 3 of them. A one-night stand 5 years ago when she was visiting Margie, and they went dancing at a club in Nashville. They both picked up guys and took them to Margie's for the night. And then 3 years of nothing. Carrie was shocked at herself, afraid of what she had done. But that fear didn't last long. She did it again. She was picked up at a bar while visiting Margie, and spent the night in the guy's hotel room. He was a married businessman from Los Angeles. She wasn't as scared anymore. She felt guilty. She promised herself she wouldn't do it again, but she wasn't as scared anymore. The 3rd guy was Roger Dion. Everything was as I imagined. He met her on business in Charlotte. They flirted, and instead of telling him to fuck off, she let him keep working on her. A few months later, after a few private dinners and a few stolen kisses, she agreed. But she told him that she absolutely would never meet him in Charlotte. In the end, he came up with the idea for her to visit him in Florida. On her last visit to Margie, she flew to Nashville on Saturday, then boarded a plane to Miami and spent 4 days with Roger, after which she returned to Nashville before the end of the week. She didn't want to risk flying home straight from Miami, and somehow I'd find out about it. She swore she had no intention of seeing him again, and I believed her. Not a single part of this story suggested anything romantic. The way Carrie explained it, her story seemed pretty ordinary. It was exciting, like a new book, but nothing extraordinary. When she finished talking, she leaned back in her chair, looking tired. To my surprise, I already knew what I wanted to say. All right, I said. Now it's your turn to listen. When I point at you, you'll say, yes, Jack. Otherwise, keep your mouth shut, okay, Carrie? I pointed at her. She nodded, looking scared, then added, I love you, and I appreciate our marriage, but I hate what you've done. Part of me wants to grab you by the neck and slowly strangle you, watching your face as you die. You shat on me and on our marriage. You betrayed our love, my faith in you, and all the hard work we both did to make our marriage a success. You should be damn ashamed of yourself, you know that, right? I pointed at her and she quickly replied, there are only 3 things that can happen, and I've already ruled out one of them, I said. I got up and started pacing back and forth, watching her face. The first one. We can get a divorce. Nice, simple and clean. We'll just say, hasta la vista, and you can move out of this house and spread your legs in front of any asshole that catches your eye. You can be free, be as restless, selfish, and irresponsible as you want. No need to lie. No need to trample on anyone's heart. The second one. We can decide that we will have an open marriage. There's no point in living up to our marriage vows. They're so outdated and depressing, right? You satisfy the one you like. I satisfy the one I like. Stephanie Prince or anyone. And if we want, we can occasionally please each other. But that's just an option. It doesn't appeal to me. There won't be any real love, trust, or connection in that kind of arrangement. It's not a marriage that can make me happy, so I won't do it. Period. That leaves the third option. We stay married. We decide that the promises we made to each other 12 years ago, the promises to be loyal to each other, still mean something to us, even after you betrayed them all, and after I spent a few nights with Stephanie. I choose the third option. She looked scared, but she said it right away. Didn't I say not to talk? Yes, Jack, I did. I can't help it. I choose the third one. That is, if I have a choice. You haven't said yet if you'll give me the right to vote. But my vote is for the third one. All right, I said. I was pleased. But I didn't show it. Now, shut up again. The only one who has the right to vote is me. Okay. Say yes, Jack. Yes, Jack. There was a tiny glimmer of a smile on her face, and I thought maybe mine was, too. Number 3 means that a lot needs to be fixed. A lot needs to be done. You're getting tested to find out what sexually transmitted diseases this asshole has given you. And I think I need to get tested, too. I was careful with Stephanie. But even though you say you used condoms, I'm damned if I'm going to take any chances. You will start going to a therapist and we will start going to a marriage counselor. Honestly, I think the first one is important. I don't see that it's our fucking problem. It's your fucking problem. But I'm sure the consultant will help us communicate better. Even if it's just so I know when I'm going to have to kick your ass before you do something else. Even 1/8 more stupid. Next, press your legs together. Do you understand? I pointed at her and she replied, yes, Jack. There were tears on her face, but she started to smile. You remind yourself that there's only one guy you're flirting with, one guy you're kissing or touching, one guy you're satisfying. Always, and that's me. And if you don't like it, if you think it's too restrictive, then we're back to number 1. I looked at her and the smile disappeared. Yes, Jack. Yes, I understood. Yes, absolutely. There might be more options to consider as we go forward. Maybe something I'll think about later or something a marriage counselor can suggest. But for now, there are 2 things. First, you're done with Nashville. You're never going there again. Carrie's head jerked. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Finally, she nodded and said, yes, Jack. Your friend Margie played a big role in ruining our marriage, and that stops now. If you want to see her, she can come here. And after I give her a piece of my mind, I might even let her stay in the guest room for a night or 2. Do you understand? I said, yes, Jack. She said it before I even looked at her. And I'm sorry. You're absolutely right about Margie. And about all this. Now the last one. I keep seeing Stephanie. Not all the time, but from time to time. Whenever I feel like it. Have dinner, have sex, whatever. Until I decide I've had enough. Or you've had enough. Say it. I pointed at her. Yes, Jack. Her face was pale. And tears returned to her eyes. It's not very pleasant, is it? Thinking about me with her. That gorgeous body, those long legs wrapped around me. Are we making love or just kissing? Maybe we just lie there and whisper sweet words to each other. No, Jack, it's not very pleasant. It hurts. It really hurts. And I know why you say that, and you're right. So I say, yes, Jack. She was crying a little, but she held my gaze. And I'm so sorry that I was a selfish idiot. And for hurting you so much, she burst into tears again, and this time I went over and hugged her, still angry but loving her warmth and gentleness. She hugged me tightly, crying, and finally said, you haven't told me your decision yet, but I'm still in favor of the third one, with all your conditions. All right, it's my turn to speak. Number 3, Carrie, was fast asleep beside me, softly snoring. I was still awake, deep in thought, but I felt content. The evening had ended with a long, affectionate oral sex session. She wanted to have sex, but I refused to use a condom with my own wife, and she seemed embarrassed when I said that. I knew I had already made love to her without protection the night before, but I wanted to stress it. I felt surprisingly hopeful about my marriage, but I knew I wouldn't feel reassured until the blood test results came back. Maybe part of it was just growing older. At 41, my reaction to her affair was more measured than the blind rage I might have felt at 25. As I told you at the beginning of this story, I know that Carrie loves me. She's spoiled, but she loves me. So if we can do something about the part that's messed up, maybe we can do it. I didn't think I'd be dating Stephanie for very long. Making love to her was wonderful, and I really liked her, but I couldn't understand how that could stop me from rebuilding my marriage with Carrie. Very possibility seemed to me a good lever of pressure. Second story, found out my girlfriend still talks to guys she used to hook up with. Where do I go from here? Hi everyone. First off, I know it's not right to go through your partner's phone, but this is something that has been festering inside me for a while. I constantly saw Bumble notifications and Snapchats from the same guys pop up on her phone. We have been together 10 months now and are both 23. She often leaves her phone around me and doesn't mind doing so. When she was showering earlier today, I looked on her Bumble and saw a dead profile. Just notifications from deals and guys swiping on her but her not responding. There are older convos from before we got together. Nothing there. Text messages. Nothing there unless she deletes them and I have no idea. Completely clean. Snapchat. This is where things get uncertain. When I checked her Snapchat friends list, I was shocked to see how many guys were on it. It's like a ratio of 70 guys to 20 girls. I looked at some of the conversations. Some were saved. I noticed one guy, and the conversation was totally innocent. But then the next 3 guys had saved pictures of her butt that she sent to them before we started dating, and even during the first month of our relationship. I also found out she exchanged addresses with them before we got together, so I know for sure these are guys she has been involved with. She still talks to these guys occasionally, and sends them snaps, either received or delivered. It's obvious these are the guys she keeps around and used to hook up with. And it's not just 1 or 2 past flings, we're talking about more than 7 guys here. In the past, she told me her bot account, and her friend told me that she used to go to parties in AC and hook up with guys. A culmination of this information, with the weird notifications on her phone, piqued my interest. While I found no concrete evidence of cheating, I don't feel good about this, and my trust in her has gone down significantly. She never showed me direct signs of cheating. She never flakes, tells me where she has been, and seems to genuinely love me and be with me. She gets me gifts, is super supportive, we have great sex, and a great time every time we are together. Our families met and like each other. Everything is well other than her Snapchat. My question is, where do I go from here? Do I confront her about it? Do I break it off? I'm not really sure how to feel, but I don't feel great knowing that she still talks to guys she hooked up with in the past. Thanks for joining us on this chapter of Relation Tales. If you were moved by these stories, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Don't miss out on the upcoming emotional roller coaster of relationships. Your support means the world, and we can't wait to share more compelling tales with you. Until next time, remember, every relationship has a story worth telling. See you soon. Welcome to Relation Tales. Please like this video and subscribe. Relation Tales. I work for a small newspaper in the Midwest. My boss had been kind enough to give me Friday afternoon off after a string of late nights. Excited to finally get some rest, I ran a few errands before heading home. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed something odd. There were 2 cars parked there. One was my wife Tracy's, but the other was unfamiliar. Tracy usually worked until 5 p.m., so seeing her car home midday was unusual. Despite the strange sight, I trusted Tracy completely and didn't immediately assume the worst. Unlocking the front door, I stepped inside, hoping for a peaceful nap. However, what I heard shattered that hope. From upstairs, unmistakable sounds of intimacy echoed through the house. My heart sank as I realized what was happening in our bedroom. The door was obviously open, because they obviously weren't expecting company, and I could hear moaning and yelling. I took the carpeted stairs 2 at a time, and when I got near the bedroom I could hear them much more clearly. "This what you want? This what that your husband not giving you?" Railed some guy I had never heard before to my wife, who was groaning louder as she was obviously getting pounded. When I got to the door of my bedroom, I could see my gorgeous wife on her back beneath some guy who looked like he played linebacker for the Packers, giving her a tremendous sex. And from what little I could see, he was giving a lot to her. Despite what he had said, Tracy had never indicated to me previously that she felt unfilled. But what I was seeing and hearing told me I wasn't measuring up for her. I was suddenly feeling extremely nauseous, probably because my world was crumbling right in front of my eyes. Playing thrill. "Don't mind me," I finally yelled as I walked into the room, opened my closet door, took out my gym bag, and started putting a couple of changes of clothes in it. Derek barely broke stride until Tracy realized I was there and stopped screwing him. "Oh, shit, Simon, I'm so sorry you had to see this," she yelled from underneath the monster. "We were going to tell you, not if you find out like this." I confronted Tracy, my emotions running high. "Is this when you chose to do this, Trace? On our 10th anniversary?" I couldn't ignore the evidence. This wasn't a one-time thing. Tracy avoided eye contact, her silence speaking volumes. "Forget it, Tracy," I said, my voice heavy with disappointment. "I'll gather my things and leave you to it. My lawyer will handle the rest. By the way, who the hell is this Neanderthal plugging you?" "That's kind of funny," she giggled. "Derek is my attorney. He works for one of the big firms downtown." "Perfect," I said. I didn't bother to even close the front door when I left the house. I put my stuff in my Ford F-150 and headed straight for my favorite watering hole. Not exactly an auspicious start to the weekend. Most bars are pretty empty on a weekday afternoon, and the Rusty Fork was no exception. Even my favorite bartender, Noel, didn't begin his shift until 4. As I sat there, a wave of realization washed over me. Maybe I should have seen this coming. The signs were there, like when we went to one of Tracy's work events, and her colleagues showed thinly veiled contempt toward me. I sensed Tracy starting to agree with their opinions about my job and ability to provide for her desired lifestyle. She didn't hesitate to mention her higher salary, and we had a tense conversation about her behavior that night. She blamed it on being tipsy, but I wasn't fully convinced. Still, I didn't hold on to the resentment, and we seemed okay a few days later, or so I thought. Now, as I sat at the bar, I knew I should be securing my finances, but I couldn't muster the energy to care. My credit card is in my name only, which means I can spend the rest of the night getting shit-faced before sleeping it off in my truck. I'll find a hotel or an apartment to rent tomorrow. Tracy and I met at a major Midwestern university. We dated for our junior and senior years before I asked her to marry me. We knew that unless I could get on at a major newspaper in a major city, she was probably always going to out-earn me. But we both agreed that everything we made was ours, not that there would be a hers and mine. And that's what I thought we had until recently. I don't know how much of her attitude is because of her co-workers, but apparently she has lost her respect for me completely. And as for her love, well, today showed me exactly where I stood. Noel greeted me when he came on at 4 and was mildly surprised at how early I was there. I gave him the Reader's Digest version of my earlier afternoon and handed him my pickup keys with instructions to pour me into the vehicle's cab when I was done. But not to give me my keys back until I woke up tomorrow. That's harsh, dude, finding out that way, he said to me while we talked. At about 9 p.m., I wasn't feeling any pain, let alone my extremities, when a state trooper showed up in the bar. He ambled over to Noel behind the bar and asked him if a Mr. Simon Tillerson was on the premises. Noel, of course, pointed over at me. The trooper then ambled over to me. He was very good at this ambling thing, I thought in my fogged brain, and said he had some news he regretted he had to tell me. My wife and a Mr. Derek Biggs were killed on the road about 3 hours ago when a semi blew a light in town and drove over the top of Mr. Biggs' BMW convertible. Authorities had been trying to find me for 3 hours before one of my acquaintances told them about my favorite bar. Screw me, I yelled. Drinks are on me. There is a God in heaven. A cheer went up for my announcement. Trooper Reginald Masters looked like he'd seen a ghost. I don't think he was expecting glee from the new widower. Mr. Tillerson, I get that you must be in shock, but... Not shock, buddy. Ecstasy. I wailed in my drunken state. The reason I'm so screwed up is because I caught the two of them screwing in my bed this afternoon. I was going to leave the witch. Screw her dead body. This couldn't get any better. The trooper still looked appalled. I couldn't care less. Normally we like for the next of kin to identify the body, just to be completely sure it truly is that person who is dead. But I don't think Mr. Tillerson is going to be of any help tonight, Masters said to Noel. Could you make sure that someone leaves him the message to go over to the morgue tomorrow? Noel nodded affirmatively. In my drunken state, I understood what Masters had told me. Even though I knew I'd miss my wife when I sobered up, I was angry because she cheated on me and was planning to replace me. So, my anger at Tracy outweighed any love I still had for her. The next morning, I woke up in the cab of my pickup feeling stiff and sore. Despite considering staying at a hotel, I remembered what the trooper had said and went home to my empty house instead. I thought about the 9 years we spent together, especially the last 7 as a married couple. It made me sad that things had ended this way. I wasn't exactly grieving, but I couldn't help feeling some satisfaction that Tracy got what I thought she deserved. After cleaning up at home, I went to the morgue to identify Tracy's body, which looked battered. I guess having a semi go over the top of you in a convertible will do that. I asked to see the other body as well. Derek looked similar to Tracy. I hoped at least in his case death was slower to come. When I got back home, I knew I had to make at least 3 phone calls, one to my parents, one to her parents, and one to her sister, Anya. I knew somewhere deep down inside I was sorry to see her die, but at that moment every thought of her came with the visual of her urging her paramour to give it to her, and I really couldn't muster any sorrow in my heart for her. So I decided I would do my job, report the facts, and keep my lack of emotion out of the equation if I could. At least I did feel bad for Ron and Cindy Jacobs, Tracy's parents, losing their daughter. I loved Ron and Cindy almost as much as I loved my folks, and I certainly didn't want to see them hurt. From that respect, this was not going to be easy. I called my parents first and gave them the news. My mom, easily the more emotional of the two, burst into tears immediately. My father, on the extension, started asking for more specifics, so I told him about Tracy being in the car with Derek Biggs at the time of the accident. Who's Derek Biggs? He asked. I knew the question was coming, but still I hesitated before answering, which probably told him volumes. An attorney friend of Tracy's, I answered. My father is a very smart man and very perceptive. He didn't miss a beat. So why was she in the car with an attorney friend of hers at a time when she should have been home with you? Because she wasn't with me anymore, Dad. That's why. I caught her and Derek having sex in our bed earlier in the day, and I'm guessing it wasn't their first rodeo together. So I threw some clothes in a bag and left. I don't know why they were in the car at about 6. I'm assuming they were going out to eat, considering the time. Well, shit, son, I'm sorry to hear that. By this point, my mother had composed herself some and gotten back on the line. She heard enough to know what we were talking about. Are you sure she was having sex with another man, Simon? I mean, this is not the sort of thing you want to be telling people if you're not sure. I interrupted and was not very diplomatic. Mom, I caught them in the act. I've had sex just a few times in all these years to know what I was looking at. Have you talked to Ron and Cindy yet? Simon, if not, what are you going to tell them? My dad asked. As little as possible, Dad, unless they start giving me the 3rd degree like you're doing. I won't lie, if that's what you're asking. This could get messy, my dad warned. Remember, you're the one who's lost here. Show them the respect they deserve. Yes, sir, I replied solemnly. Calling Tracy's parents felt like déjà vu of my own conversation with my folks. Her mother broke down, but her father quickly picked up on the unusual circumstance. Tracy was in the car with another man at the time of her death, a time when she should have been with me. Is there something you're not telling us, Simon? Ron asked, as Cindy cried in the background. It was 6 on a Friday evening, and Tracy should have been with her husband, not in a car with another man. This equation's not adding up, son. All right, I half yelled, half croaked into the phone. Tracy was running around on me. I caught her in bed hours earlier with the guy she died with, and I gathered some things and I left. I guess they figured at that point they had nothing to hide anymore and were going out somewhere together. You caught them together, in bed, in your house. Ron sounded incredulous. He was having a tough time believing the daughter he was just told was dead was also cheating on her husband and died in the car with her lover. Yes, Ron, yes. And right now I'm so mad at her I'm actually happy the 2 of them died. The witch and her lover got what they deserved. I knew I shouldn't have said that last part to her father, however true it was. He started to yell at me on the phone until I interjected quietly, but forcefully. He was ridiculing me, Ron, while he was screwing your daughter, and she was going along with it. She demanded he give her his big tool. Yes, your daughter and my wife. I guess this saves me the trouble of divorcing her. She won't be buried in my family's plots, and I most certainly won't want to be by her side when my time comes. So just tell me the name of the funeral home your family uses and I'll make sure the body is taken there. I'll handle all of that part of it in the financial side. You and Cindy work out the rest, like the viewing. Obviously, I won't be there. You can't just pretend she didn't matter in your life, son, Ron said in his best calming voice. You 2 were together for almost a decade. You can't tell me all that can be erased. It can and it has. I knew it was over the moment I saw her with Derek Biggs in our bedroom, I stated firmly. Why should her death change how I feel? Maybe someday, with time, you'll feel differently about this and wish you had said a proper goodbye, Ron suggested, almost in a whisper. I don't think so, I replied quietly. The funeral service took place at Ron and Cindy's home church, the same church where Tracy and I had made our vows. The irony wasn't lost on me. I briefly considered attending, but anger began to well up inside me. Have you ever wanted to throttle a dead person? That's where I was. While attending might have comforted Tracy's parents, it would only have fueled my anger further. And believe me, I had more than enough anger to deal with. About an hour after I figured the service would be over, I got a call from Tracy's sister, Anya. I knew this wasn't going to pleasant, but I suppose she needed to vent, especially if her parents hadn't told her the complete story. Tracy was right. You are a piece of shit. You are a small man with small dreams, and you have a small tool. You write small stories for a small newspaper and have a small future. I always wondered what took her so long to start cheating on you. Well, pleasant day to you too, Anya, I replied in greeting. So, I'm guessing you knew all along. So then why, if I was such a bad guy, would you have even wanted me there? Because you embarrassed my parents, you piece of shit. How can you even answer the question as to why Tracy's husband wasn't at the funeral? My parents practically died of embarrassment when they had to tell the Reverend why you weren't coming. You were a piece of shit and I hope you die, too. Now you're catching on, Anya. I yelled into the phone. That's exactly what I thought about your sister and her lover after I caught them. And you know what? I got lucky. They did die. So now why don't you just go and leave me alone? I thought that went well. I got a realtor and put the house up for sale immediately. I moved my stuff into the spare bedroom and I sold off for dirt cheap all of our bedroom furniture including the sheets and pillowcases. I was never going to touch any of that stuff again. As for the rest of Tracy's stuff, I took her jewelry, most of which I had given her, and sold it to a local jeweler and gave the money to a church food pantry. Her clothes and everything else I boxed up and took to her parents, telling them they could keep or dispose of the stuff at their leisure. Those boxes included our wedding album, and the usual small photos you normally have of each other. I had enough photos of Tracy in my head, with the very last one of her and Derek Biggs in our marital bed that was never going to be able to be forgotten. Ron and I made small talk as he helped me unload by pickup. When the last box had been unloaded, I looked at Ron and Cindy and they looked back at me. We moved in for a tight family hug. I'm pretty sure we were all crying. "See you guys," I whispered as my voice failed me. All of this was done in the first 2 weeks after Tracy's death. Somewhere in the middle of all this, I got a phone call from Krusmiller Insurance. Tracy and I always had life insurance, so I knew why they were calling. It just wasn't a priority in my life until I got everything squared away. With the obvious tasks out of the way, it was time to return their call. Tracy, being the insurance expert, handled all our insurance purchases. While we discussed everything, I trusted her to make the final decisions in her field. One of those decisions was a $1 million life policy on each of us, with a double indemnity clause for accidental death before age 45. This meant I was due a $2 million payout. But then the insurance agent dropped another bombshell that almost made me choke on my coffee. Since the truck driver caused the accident, his company would likely have to pay for wrongful death, covering both Tracy and Derek. The agent advised me not to settle for less than another $2 million, suggesting $3 to $4 million would be appropriate given the circumstances. After legal fees, I could expect to have about $5 million in the bank. I actually wound up with $4.75 million in the bank after the lawyer took his cut. I really didn't care at that point as I was completely numb. The trucking company settled with Derek Biggs' widow as well, and the signing for both was to be at the same time and place. I had never met his widow until the signing, and while I thought Tracy was a beautiful woman, Derek's widow was at least as beautiful, so I wondered why he would risk his marriage for an affair. I guessed that maybe he was so sure of not getting caught he didn't see any risk to the affair. After we had signed the paperwork with the company, Ellie Biggs invited me out for a cup of coffee. Seems she had one question in all of this that never got answered by anybody, and she was hoping that I could provide that information. My husband didn't have a friend named Tracy Tillerson that I was aware of, and after checking, his firm told me she was not a client. Yet they were in the car together when they died. Nobody in Derek's office knows who this woman is, or if they do, they are not telling me. What was your wife to my husband, Mr. Tillerson? I took a big gulp of coffee. Damn, I hated to be the bearer of more bad news to this extremely good-looking woman. I dropped my eyes to the table in the Starbucks we were at. "Oh, that bad," she said on cue. "Please, Mr. Tillerson, I deserve to know the truth." So I told her the whole story from my side. She looked appalled. I suddenly felt sick to my stomach. "Thank you for your honesty," she said as she got up from the table and left the coffee shop. Although I was now wealthy by most people's standards, my life sucked. I had no desire to date. I had moved into a shitty one-bedroom apartment just to have a roof over my head. I had few friends and didn't really care. I worked at the newspaper, rode my bike a lot, and lifted weights several times a week. I just existed. My father, bless his soul, finally convinced me to go to a therapist. His diagnosis, trust issues. He encouraged me to get out into the public more and try to have a semblance of a life. That was a waste of an hour. I never made another appointment. So I'm sitting in my place watching baseball, and just thinking this time replaying over the conversation with Anya that occurred after Tracy's funeral 6 months earlier. She said that I wrote small stories for a small newspaper, and she was right. I had taken the job because it was the only newspaper opening near Tracy's job, and since she made more money than me, I sacrificed my plans of someday moving to a larger paper until Tracy decided we should move. Then I would look again. But now I wasn't tied to the community. In fact, I probably didn't ever have to work another day in my life. I was free to come and go as I pleased and write whatever the hell I wanted and didn't care if anyone ever read it. I went in and gave my boss, Ernie, my 2 weeks' notice. Sitting in my apartment that night, I looked at my library, so to speak. It was a collection of about 30 books, 28 of them non-fiction. One of the 2 fictions was Moby Tool by Herman Melville. That got me thinking, which some say is dangerous for me. One of my academic strengths in school, according to all the crazy tests you take, was abstract thinking. Before the days of hyperlinks on the internet, I used to do that all the time in my mind. Take a thought, mull it over, twist it around slightly, and go in yet another direction. It worked for me, but it didn't make it easy for my friends to follow my thinking when we would get into deep discussions about things. And they learned never to ask, what if, when I was around. 10 minutes later, it occurred to me that Tracy was always going to be my white whale, and I had to hunt her. But I would do it with the written word. And that's how it started. I sat down at the computer and composed my first fiction story since 8th grade. The Derek Biggs character was killed off, and the Tracy character got severely punished by life. It took me 2 full days to write it, edit it, and polish it, but for the first time in half a year I felt energized. I still couldn't punish Tracy in real life, but I could in my head in this story. I went on to write 17 more short stories over the next 2 months, changing things up but keeping a couple of constants. The Derek character always was killed off, and the Tracy character always got her comeuppance. That felt good when I would complete one, set it aside, and then read the finished product. And then I happened back to Mobytool. It was an actual book, with a cover and bound pages. I can do that, I thought to myself. Yes, I could, and I did. 6 months later I had my first novel, a historical romance, of all things. Of course, the Derek character got killed off, quite viciously I might add, and the Tracy character was again humbled. I thought it was pretty good, and apparently a publisher did, too. The deal I got for my book wasn't amazing, but at least I didn't have to pay to self-publish it. Somehow, it caught the attention of someone else besides me, and the publishing company decided to do 2 more print runs. They even wanted a second book and offered to double the money, so I went ahead and wrote another one. This time, it was a murder mystery where the character based on Derek was the victim, and the one based on Tracy ended up in jail. Again, completing the book made me feel a lot better about life, especially when it started selling well. It felt like a lot of people agreed with my feelings about Tracy and Derek. Another publishing company approached me after the success of the second book and offered me a 3-book deal, also doubling the money. Since I was already wealthy, I didn't need the extra cash, so I gave the first company the chance to match the deal. They agreed without hesitation. So I stayed with them and gave them 3 more books over the next 18 months. Each book used the same basic storyline, although I did change the scenarios, and in the third one I even tried some humor. All 3 were hits, but most importantly to me, I kept feeling better about myself with each book finished. I knew I was never going to be able to get any of my questions about what she did and why she did it answered, so this was as close to any satisfaction I was going to get. Like the old song says, love the one you're with. I signed another 3-book deal with my publisher, again with my price doubling, and this time they had some bigger news. Seems that one of the movie studios was looking to make at least 2 of the books into feature films for some incredibly nice pocket change. They even wanted my help with the screenplay. What the hell, sure, I said. While I had never been a big fan of Oprah Winfrey, her endorsement of a book usually sent the author into the stratosphere of success, and when she chose my 6th book for one of her books of the month, I got to experience that firsthand. It was amazing. And not only was I now a successful author, but I was now being recognized in public. Obviously, there was a downside to that, but I guess that's sort of the price of success. In general, most people are very polite and nice, but every now and then you get a jerk who wants to prove that he or she is not impressed by you. That's okay, because I'm not impressed with me either, but I don't need to take shit from anybody else. I can do rude as well as anybody. So I was sitting in my favorite bar, the same one I was in when the state trooper told me Tracy was dead, just enjoying a Friday evening with my good buddy Jack Daniels. Now worth north of $10 million, I still enjoyed the simpler things in life. A good drink, working out, riding my road bike, a good-looking woman every now and then. I still lived in the same crappy apartment, and really hadn't been searching for lasting female companionship. I think a few of the regulars at the bar knew about my writing success, but for the most part everyone there pretty much left me alone. You know, some playful shit slinging every now and then, but nobody really said anything about reading my stuff. Of course, I was pretty sure that about half of them couldn't read, so that took them off my potential fan club list. Noel, my favorite bartender, knew about my success, and we would occasionally talk about it or something I was working on. But he was a good dude and apparently kept his mouth shut about me. Of course, the fact that I tipped him $20 every time I was in the place probably contributed something to that. I was watching the television screen closest to me, listening to the background music, and in general not paying attention to life when 2 women were suddenly alongside me at the bar. They were both attractive, I guessed in their mid-30s like I was, and were dressed in jeans and regular tops. They weren't trying to impress anybody, obviously, but there was something about the one farthest from me that seemed familiar. I knew why as soon as she started talking to me. You don't remember me, do you, Mr. Tillerson? She asked as her friend leaned back on her stool so we had a clear line of sight of each other. Truthfully, I didn't at first. Then it clicked. I was looking at Ellie Biggs, Derek Biggs' widow. I had only met her the one time, at the settlement signing when the trucking company paid us for killing our cheating spouses. And at that time I confirmed for her that yes, her shithead husband was cheating on her with my wife. I most certainly do remember you, Mrs. Biggs. It took me a minute, however. How have you been? You certainly look great, if you don't mind me saying so. Ellie blushed and looked at her friend. Then she looked me straight in the eyes. I am much better than the last time you saw me, and honestly, I have you to thank for that, at least from an emotional standpoint. You see, Derek's death left me about $2 million richer, but I was a total mess when he was killed. And then on top of that I found out he was cheating on me. I was both sad and angry, particularly angry that I would never get to tell that cheating prick what I thought about him. Then one day Rachel here brought me your first book. She had seen your name on the cover and remembered it from my account of our meeting. At first I started skimming it, realizing you were writing about our worthless spouses and you just kept drawing me in. When Derek's character was killed off, I can't describe the feeling of relief I had. Then when Tracy got hers, I felt vindicated, for lack of a better word. That was the best I had felt since that horrible day. I've read every single book you've written. This may sound stupid, but they make me feel better about myself. And I usually giggle like a schoolgirl when Derek and Tracy get theirs. That's kind of how I feel when I finish writing one. I related. I'm glad I could help you as well. Considering how well they've sold, I'm guessing there must be a lot of people who can relate to what we've been through. I honestly never considered writing for a career. Hell, I hadn't written fiction since 8th grade. And maybe since I really didn't have to write. Since I had my settlement money. And a lot of insurance money, maybe that helped things flow out of me. I guess I'll do it as long as it feels good. The three of us shifted over to a table, and I bought a couple of snack trays to munch on. We talked until midnight, when the ladies said they needed to get going. I told them I honestly couldn't remember having a nicer night in quite some time, and asked if we could do it again in the future. How about next Friday night? But we start off with a real dinner first. On me, I asked. They both accepted. I met them at my favorite Italian restaurant the next Friday night, and we again had a good time. Both women were attractive in their own right. Ellie had long blonde hair, blue eyes, and a curvy figure, while Rachel had long black hair and a more athletic build, with long, toned legs and a shapely rear. Rachel wore a short, form-fitting skirt that accentuated her best features. Honestly, I felt a bit awkward having two of the most attractive women in the restaurant sitting at my table. But deep down, I couldn't deny that I secretly enjoyed their company. We had a great meal and engaging conversation. But with the restaurant filling up, I didn't want to keep others waiting. So, I suggested we continue our evening at a nearby club for an after-dinner drink. Rachel declined the invitation, so I agreed to drive Ellie home after our drink. At Stella's bar, which was only half full, Ellie and I were able to chat comfortably. The first thing I asked her was whether she or Rachel was the winner, and if the winner got me, or if it was the loser. Apparently, she didn't give me enough credit for knowing how the female mind worked, because she blushed a deep red. I was the winner. I hope, she stammered quietly. Actually, I think I'm the winner, but I was the winner when you both sat down with me. I think every single guy in the restaurant wanted to beat the crap out of me for hogging the prettiest two women, I said. Ellie blushed deeply again. Can I tell you something? And you promise you won't get mad at me? She looked at me seriously, as she scrunched up her nose. I nodded cautiously, not sure where this was going. I absolutely hated your guts when I left the lawyer's office after we signed the settlement papers. I knew that you had nothing to do with Derek cheating on me with Tracy, but in my mind the fact that you knew, and I didn't put you one up on me, and I didn't take it very well with everything else going down. I kind of felt like you were holding out on me as well. I got that vibe, and I totally understood it. Besides the two of us getting together after our cheating spouses get killed. Oh come on, that's ridiculous. That kind of stuff only happens on the Hallmark Channel. So I let you walk away without even saying goodbye. So a year later Rachel hands me this book, Ellie went on, and it's obvious you were pouring your heart out in the pages, and it was obvious that it was about the affair between our spouses. And it was like someone opened the curtains and let the sunlight in when they got theirs. You completely got it. I have been seeing a shrink for almost a year, and he noticed the change in my attitude right away. So I gave him the book to read, and at my next session he said, and I quote here, "Pardon my French, but this guy's a genius." Well, if I'm some kind of a genius, then why am I living in a hole in the wall with more than $10 million in the bank? Ellie looked stunned. I knew you had your settlement money, and the big insurance policy, but I didn't realize you were doing that well for yourself. Why are you living like that? Because when you are by yourself and afraid to trust anyone, money doesn't mean a whole, I answered. Basically, I'm a simple man with no big vices. I don't have to work, if you want to call my writing work. I don't have anybody to share my life and my money with. Saying it out loud for the first time, I realized just how pathetic I was. I was basically living my life in a fantasy book world where I made Tracy and Derek pay for their cheating ways every 6 months or so. Yes, it was fun, but in reality, I wasn't really living. I was merely existing. I don't know how long I sat at the table staring at nothing, hearing nothing, feeling nothing until suddenly I felt electricity coming from my lips. Rather, the electricity was coming from Ellie's lips, which were plastered up against mine, with her tongue soon finding its way into my mouth. I returned her kiss like a man in a desert finding a sip of water. We stayed joined at the lips for probably 30 seconds, and when she pulled away she told me I needed to pay the tab and take her back to my apartment. I did so like a man awakening from a dream. In the 4+ years since Tracy died, I have screwed several women, but I hadn't made love to a woman since my wife died. I knew from talking with Ellie that she'd had a few men since Derek, but not a lot either, so I took it real slow and gentle. The kisses were deep and meaningful. We ran our hands over each other's bodies slowly, truly feeling with our fingertips. I mean, Stevie Wonder would have been proud of us. Then when it came time for the main act, we had an amazing and wild sex. I lost all sense of time and space for a second there, and when I regained my senses I was gently laying on top of Ellie, mostly supporting myself with my arms, which were beginning to quiver from the strain. I rolled us gently to our sides so we were facing each other as she slowly opened her eyes while still gasping for breath. "Wow," she mouthed at me with no sound coming forth. We lay looking at each other silently, playing a little kissy face like teenagers. Finally, Ellie spoke up. "I understand everything you've told me, and all I can say is if you let me in and trust me, I will prove worthy of your trust every day for the rest of our lives." "If that's a proposal, I accept," I replied. No, we didn't rush into marriage after one passionate night. But that night marked the beginning of our life together. About a year later, once we were both confident that we had worked through our personal issues, we tied the knot. We moved into a spacious new house we had built in the countryside, with 5 bedrooms, one for us and one for each of the 4 children we planned to have. We even added a guest suite for frequent visitors. As I embraced my relationship with Ellie, I found that I no longer needed to write revenge stories about Tracy and Derek. Our love and life together were enough to fill my pages with happiness instead of punishment. Despite its continued success, and my enjoyment in writing them, I still penned 1 or 2 revenge stories each year. This pleased my publisher's accountants greatly. The karma train had been kind to me, so I was happy to welcome a few more passengers aboard for the journey. Second story. Hooked up with a guy who claimed he was single. Recently, I, 24, was hooking up with this guy, and his girl caught us in the middle of it. Jordan told me he was single when we first started talking back in November. This is the second time I've been to his house, and he told me that he lives with his roommate. I never met his roommate, and he was sneaking me in. That should have been my red flag right there, but I didn't mind it. While we were in the middle of it, I saw that someone was coming through his bedroom window pulling on his hair. I didn't know what it was at first or why, and I saw the woman pull out her flashlight. I ran butt-ass naked, heart pounding and racing to the bathroom, forgetting my clothes in the bedroom. I locked myself in the bathroom for a while because I felt scared. Before she broke open the door, I grabbed a towel. I begged and pleaded with her, telling her that I didn't know Jordan was in a relationship. He always told me he was single and just had a roommate. She tried to hit me while I was naked, so I ran to Jordan's room, struggled to put my clothes on, and then ran out of the house. I felt terrible because she kept hurting Jordan, pulling his hair and hitting him all over the house. I didn't want any part of it, so I walked down the road while calling my friend to come pick me up. She found me at the end of her street and confronted me about what happened. She said mean things about my appearance and threatened me. I know what I did was wrong, but I truly didn't know Jordan was dating someone when he told me he wasn't in a relationship. Now I'm feeling lost and don't know what to do. Third story. Getting cheated on has cost me a lifelong STD. Just wanted to vent really because the memories like to come up every so often and it makes me sick all over again. Well, my story is a bit depressing to be quite honest. I was on a study abroad trip in the UK and my GF was attending uni in the States. I was away for about 12 months and that was when things started to get thrown off. Like completely. She wasn't as responsive to my texts, calls, and started going out a lot more than usual with friends of hers I've never met. I eventually returned and all of a sudden she was way more affectionate than when we first got together. I just assumed she was happy to see me again after 1 year away. She and I have been intimate before, but ever since returning from my trip, I started to break out in my nether regions. The breakouts were really, really bad and awfully painful. I got checked out and well, turns out I had HSV too. I was also put on Valtrex to help with the breakouts. When I found out about the diagnosis, I immediately talked to my girlfriend about it. But I made a mistake by doing it over the phone instead of meeting her face to face. She made me feel like I was the one who cheated on her while I was away. She was crying and shouting at me, and then she said she wanted to break up with me, as if I had betrayed her. We argued back and forth, and I kept asking her to get tested to prove her STD results, but she avoided the question. Eventually, she blocked me on all platforms and told her friends and family that I cheated on her, when it was actually the other way around. I tried reaching out to her family to explain what really happened, but she somehow convinced them to block me and not answer my calls. To this day, I've never heard from her or received any confirmation about her status, but I do know without an absolute doubt that she was the one who cheated and has now given me an incurable STD. Mind you, I do not cheat nor do I believe in cheating. Plus, she was my first ever GF of 2.5 years. I was pissed and depressed for a really long time. Still kinda am now, to be frank. The only thing I can do is really give myself some sort of peace so I can move FWD. Not only did I feel blindsided but completely betrayed because I have to live with this for the rest of my life. Thanks for joining us on this chapter of Relation Tales. If you were moved by these stories, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Don't miss out on the upcoming emotional roller coaster of relationships. Your support means the world, and we can't wait to share more compelling tales with you. Until next time, remember, every relationship has a story worth telling. See you soon. Welcome to Relation Tales. Please like this video and subscribe. Relation Tales. After a tough day at work, I came back home and couldn't find my wife. I called out her name as I went up the stairs. "I'm back," I said. She replied, "I'll be down soon, Tarzan." It was a playful thing we did. We first met at a costume party. I was dressed as Tarzan and she was Jane. We nearly crashed into each other, and I apologized, thinking she was Tarzan. But she corrected me, poking my chest, saying, "I'm Jane." Pointing at her amazing cleavage, she laughed. It turned out that her real name was Jane, and from then on we were Tarzan and Jane. We had been married for what seemed to me like 5 happy years, and I opened a beer, sat on the couch, and turned on the 6 o'clock news. The headlines ended when Jane came down the stairs. My eyes almost popped out of their sockets. She was wearing my favorite LVD. It reached to mid-thigh, and while the neckline might not have been red carpet worthy, it wasn't modest. I knew she was completely backless, which meant she wasn't wearing a bra, although the movement of her breasts still gave it away. She was also wearing a necklace that I gave her for our anniversary just a month ago. I took my phone to capture this vision for posterity, although I didn't know what I would really need it for. Oh, I didn't realize we had plans to go out. Let me quickly get ready and change my clothes. So, where are we headed? Actually, we're not going anywhere together. Robert Cohen asked me to join him for dinner and dancing tonight. I might be back late, so don't wait up for me. Bob Cohen. Isn't he the guy who got in trouble with married women at company parties? No, that's not him. It was just a misunderstanding caused by a jealous husband. Well, there's a jealous husband here, too, who says there's no way I'm going to let you date him. You may not belong to me, but when we made our marriage vows, we gave ourselves to each other. It means something to me. I thought it meant something to you. Oh, don't be so medieval. It's the 21st century. No one believes in this shit anymore. Hey, I wish you had told me about this earlier so that we could get divorced and date whoever we want. Divorce. She threw her head back with a laugh. Following her to the door, I grabbed an old friend from the closet when Alexis pulled into the driveway. "Here's Robert. Order yourself a pizza or something." She walked out the door. "Jane," I said, and when she turned around I tore off her dress, leaving her standing there in just a tight black thong and heels. She froze for a moment, then ran back into the house. I headed for the Lexus, tapping the Louisville bump on my left palm, and Cohen backed up, burning rubber to speed away. Nodding to the neighbors who liked Jane's free show, I returned to the house, returning the bat to the closet. I took a fresh beer as the first one had already warmed up and sat down again, waiting for the fireworks. I didn't have to wait long before Jane came downstairs wrapped in a bathrobe, and she was furious. I couldn't keep track of how she was ranting and raving. As Paul Simon said, I heard words that I had never heard in the Bible. I just sat there until she calmed down. "What were you thinking? What were you counting on?" I asked. "I don't know. Our lives have become so routine that we never seem to have as much fun as we used to. How is it that I'm only hearing about this now? Not to mention the last few times I've tried to get you to do something else. You've always been too busy or uninterested, or it felt wrong. Even if you thought it was okay to cheat, why embarrass me by trying to involve me in public?" I didn't want to cheat. I thought if I told you, it wouldn't be cheating. That's the silliest thing I've ever heard. Being intimate with someone else without my consent is definitely cheating. "Maybe you'll let me?" she asked, looking at me hopefully. "You're really crazy. I need to leave before I do or say something we'll both regret." I grabbed my keys and left before she could stand up. I did what any other manly man would do in this situation. I went to my favorite bar to cry in my beer. "What's the matter, John?" Sam said, putting another bottle in front of me. "You look like you've lost your best friend." "Maybe you're not that far off the mark, Sam." When I came home tonight, Jane was dressed to the nines and told me that she was coming home from work with this pussy, and that I can't wait for her. Of course you told her no. Of course I said that. What kind of asshole do you take me for? I was just about to wipe this silly grin off his face when he said, "I'm just messing with you, man." So what happened next? Oh, she was telling me all the usual nonsense about how I don't own her. That loyalty is medieval. I take it you didn't buy it. Ding ding ding. I got it in one copy. Right at that moment, this jerk pulled into the driveway and Jane headed for the door. "What are you saying? What did you do?" I grabbed a persuasion tool from the closet, followed her, and tore off her dress right on the street. She froze for a minute, then realized that all the neighbors could see her in her thong, and ran back into the house. I went to the car with my Louisville Slugger and the pussy took off. "It looks like this is a victory for you. So what brings you to my humble establishment?" The victory was short-lived. I was sipping a beer when she came downstairs, pouting like a bear. When she calmed down a bit, she started talking nonsense again. Our sex life was a routine. It wouldn't be cheating if she didn't do it behind my back if I gave her permission. Sam was speechless. That's when I had to get out of there. And here I am. Sam opened a couple more cold bottles. We clinked glasses and drank. I had another drink before I decided I'd better stop before risking an accident. "Good night and good luck, John." "Thanks, Sam. I think I'm going to need this." When I got home, Jane was already in bed. I completed my evening routines, pulled on my pajama bottoms, and got into bed with my back to Jane. As I was falling asleep, I thought I heard her soft sobs, but I ignored them. When I came downstairs, Jane was already up and cooking breakfast. Breakfast was quiet until we finished cleaning and Jane started again. "John, why can't you see that times have changed? No one expects to spend their whole life with just one person." "Well, I don't think I'm alone. As for being with one person all our lives, neither of us was a virgin. We dated others. You know that's not what I mean. We were just kids then. We barely knew where we were going. Now we have more experience, more opportunities for comparison. I don't need to compare anything. I compared a lot before I asked you to marry me. And I asked you because I knew you were the one I wanted to spend my life with. When you said yes, you said you felt the same way. Were you lying?" "No, but what? Have you changed your mind? If so, then maybe we should get a divorce." "I don't want a divorce." "Well, you can't have both. If you don't want a divorce, then you'll have to forget this nonsense." Lowering her eyes, she said, "I don't want a divorce. So it's settled," I said, although I wasn't sure. Although Jane claimed that she had given up on the idea of another man, I found it hard to believe her. I got worried whenever she came home late without letting me know, especially if she didn't call back when she said she would. I started thinking she might be seeing someone else secretly, so I began checking up on her. But no, I didn't hire a detective or spy on her phone or car. I just started showing up at her place for lunch unexpectedly and calling her at random times. Our relationship started feeling strained, and I'm sure she noticed it too. Even our intimacy wasn't the same anymore. It felt forced and lacking the spark it used to have. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. "Jane, I think we should get a divorce." She was shell-shocked. "No, but I thought we were okay." "Really? Do you think that everything is fine with us? That we are somewhere close to where we were before, when everything was fine with us?" She lowered her eyes and shook her head. "Telling my parents was the hardest part. They couldn't understand why we couldn't fix everything. When my father-in-law cornered me one day, I showed him a photo of her half-dressed and he backed away. We faced a lot of questions from the family. I let the guilt pour over me to spare Jane the embarrassment, but in the end I had to show everyone the photo and tell them what she was trying to do. Having received the full program from her family, she came to me in search of sympathy. "John, isn't there anything I can do to change your mind about the divorce?" I put my hand to my chin and thought. I came up with an idea that she would never agree with. "Okay, Jane, I won't stop the divorce, but I will postpone it on one condition." Her mood has improved significantly. "Anything, John, anything. Be careful when you say that. Anything is a lot." "I'm not worried," she said. "I'm sure you won't go crazy." "What is the condition?" "I'll let you date other men as long as I can date other women." I was sure I saw her smirk before she hid behind a sickly sweet smile. "Of course, John, that's fair. That's it." I bet she didn't think I could find another woman. "There's something else," I said. "What?" "You can't date until I make a date." She seemed agitated. I knew she had a boyfriend in mind, and I thought she was worried about what would happen if I didn't find anyone. I decided to throw her a bone. "If I can't find a date in 2 weeks, you can go on your date." It brought out one of the brightest smiles I've seen from her in recent weeks, and she wrapped her arms around my neck and kissed me. "That's great, John, thank you. You'll see, this will be exactly what will revive our marriage." Yes, it will revive him, or pour him into the toilet. A few days later, I surprised her by saying I had a date and suggested a double date for next Friday. She probably thought I was just pretending, imagining she'd go out while I stayed home alone. Little did she know, I had already set up a date to put an end to all this confusion. On Monday, I took a long lunch break to buy new clothes and hid them in the car. Then, on Friday, I left work early to get my hair done and return home before Jane. Sneaking into the guest room with my new clothes, I was in the shower when I heard the garage door open. After shaving and brushing my teeth, I went to the bedroom to finish getting ready. When I emerged from the guest room in my new outfit, and with a new hairstyle, I think I caught her off guard. But she quickly regained her composure and said, "Robert will pick me up at 6:30. It's okay, we've booked a table at Amelia's for 7 o'clock. They're in my name in case you get there before us," I said, walking out the door. What Jane didn't know was that we had a new employee at work, Candide DeSantis. Candide was a red-haired bombshell who made every red-blooded American man turn his head whenever she passed by. She was completely professional and never gave office gossips a reason to whisper. We struck up a casual friendship, and when she flirted with me from time to time, I politely showed her my wedding ring. Needless to say, she was curious when I invited her to have a drink with me after work. I got to the bar before her, and was staring into my glass when she came in. I said, "So, John, what happened to rip the last American Boy Scout out of his shell?" She said with a laugh. One look into my sad eyes brought her out of her teasing mood. "Oh, John, I'm so sorry," she said, putting a warm hand on top of mine. "I didn't mean to tease you, but you're usually so straightforward. You look like you've lost your best friend." My eyes started to water and I turned away. She put her arm around my shoulders and led me to a table, and I took my drink. She sat patiently while I gathered my courage and told her my sad story. "Well," she said, "there's only one thing we can do." Yes, we are. I'll be your date." I laughed for the first time since Jane came up with this crazy idea. "Why are you laughing?" "I'm serious." I stared into her eyes for a few moments, expecting a loud, "Gotcha." That never came, and finally realized that she was serious. "Why? Why me? I know you don't mess with married men." "Damn it, you hardly mess with single men either. If they thought they had half a chance, all the straight people and half the gay people in the office would be lining up to date you. I'm not just looking for a date. As you say, I can date any guy I want. I like you very much. Maybe it's because you don't always undress me with your eyes." "Yes," I said, "not always. I know that sometimes you do it. You have to be dead to never do it. But you always treat me with respect. When we meet, you listen to my ideas. You support me when other guys try to brush them off because they come from me. More importantly, I like you, and I'm mad at your wife for being so disrespectful to you. So are we on a date or not? I may have been born at night, but not last night. You're in business." I finished the rest of my drink and walked Candide to her car. She gave me her number, gave me a friendly hug, and left. I thought that my life would become very interesting. When I arrived at Candide's house, I barely had time to get out and open the door before she got to the car. She was a little taller than Jane, but still shorter than me. Unlike Jane's short dress on her unlucky date, Candide's dress was a bit longer, reaching just below the knee. It was tight-fitting with a slit on the left side that went up almost to her hip. The color was a bright emerald green, which looked great with her wavy red hair that fell to her waist. Her dress showed more cleavage than I'd ever seen on Jane, and Candide nearly slipped when I helped her into the car. As I sat in the driver's seat, I got a glimpse of her creamy white thigh before she adjusted her dress and flashed me a big smile. "We can have fun later, cowboy," she said, making me feel flustered from her deep laughter. And just when I was already feeling shy, she started rubbing my thigh, which made me feel even more embarrassed as I started getting aroused again. Luckily, we reached the restaurant before things got out of hand, and I managed to regain control of myself as we walked in. Jane and Robert were already there. Although I had seen Robert before, his appearance that evening didn't leave any more of an impression on me than the other times I had seen him. Jane, on the other hand, lost her temper, and I can't remember ever seeing her this hot. Robert did not get up, so I did not extend my hand to him, but only nodded to Jane, helping Candide to sit down. Jane was obviously amazed that I had arranged such a great date. I think she was going to make some sarcastic remark, but changed her mind. Robert, on the other hand, couldn't take his eyes off Candide's cleavage, and Jane had to elbow him in the ribs to make sure his gaze wasn't wandering. I thought dinner might be awkward, but after a hesitant start, a casual observer would think we were just two ordinary couples, not husband and wife with different partners. After dinner, we went to the club for a drink and a dance. When the dancing was fast, there were no special problems, but when the slow dance started and Candide snuggled up to me, Jane's gaze could kill. Jane began to rub against Robert. It looked like she was trying to make love to him right on the dance floor. She was attracting the kind of attention that would normally embarrass her, but she was in her own little world. When Robert's hand reached under her dress to stroke her breasts, I was embarrassed for her and took Candide back to the table. We continued to watch Jane and Robert put on a show until finally the manager came over and patted them on the shoulder. Although I obviously didn't hear what they were talking about, they were apparently asked to leave, as Jane ran to the table in tears, grabbed her cape and left the club, with Robert quickly following on her heels. "Well, of course you know how to have a good time with a girl," Candide said, giggling. I could only laugh, and we went back to the dance floor. When we were ready to leave, I approached the manager. "I would like to apologize for our companions," I said. "Don't think about it. There are no complaints, sir. You see, it was my wife, or rather my future ex-wife, and I think she was a little jealous of my date." The manager was a little puzzled, then looked Candide up and down. "I understand, sir," he said with a smile. "Please come at any time," he said, returning to his duties. I took Candide to her apartment and walked her to the door. When I bent down to give her a friendly goodnight kiss, she surprised me by pulling me towards her for a passionate kiss. "Do you want to come in for a drink at night?" "What is it?" she asked. For some reason it seemed to me that she had something more on her mind than just a nightcap, but who am I to argue? The cup was forgotten as soon as the door closed when she pushed me onto the couch and straddled my lap. The slit on her dress opened wide, giving me a tantalizing look at the lace panties. She unbuttoned the top of her dress, allowing it to fall to her waist, exposing firm breasts and thick, protruding nipples. I wasted no time pressing my lips to one and massaging the other. My organ was getting hard, and from the way she fidgeted in my lap she must have felt it. And indeed soon she slid to the floor and unbuttoned my trousers. When the underwear cleaned my organ, it popped out right in front of her face, almost hitting her nose. With a smile, she licked the bottom and around the tip before taking the head in her mouth. She did it painfully slowly, and I didn't know how long I would last. She slowly moved away until only the head was in her mouth, and circled the head with her tongue before slowly taking even more into her mouth. She moved back and forth, slowly at first, then faster. We had the hottest love. Fortunately, since I had already finished once, I was able to hold on until Candide had another orgasm before I shot my seed into her. I rolled over next to her and she slid next to me, resting her head on my shoulder. Lying there, I had a nervous thought. In my excitement, I forgot to use a condom. "It's okay, I'm taking pills." Fortunately, she soon experienced a strong orgasm and eased the pressure. I took a deep breath. I do not know how long we made love, but it seemed to me that it took only a few moments before we burst into mutual orgasms. As we fell asleep feeling content, I couldn't figure out why Jane thought our sex life was dull and routine. But being with Candide showed me it wasn't because of me. I stayed the night at Candide's place and woke up to her gently kissing my body. After we showered separately, I made breakfast for her. "Wow," she said, "you're not only a great lover but you can cook too. I could get used to having you around." When we sat down to eat, I had to talk to her about something serious. "I really like you, and last night was amazing, but I need to work on my marriage problems. Even if I get divorced, I don't know when I'll be ready for another relationship." "Don't worry, John," she said, "I was just joking. I like you too, and if everything works out, of course I can see us in a relationship, but you're right. First you have to settle things with your wife." We finished eating, just chatting about nothing until I decided I had to go home and see if anything could be saved from our marriage. I walked in and saw Jane sitting at the kitchen table, clutching a coffee cup. She looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. One look at my contented face caused her to burst into tears again. I took a cup of coffee and sat down opposite her. "So, how was your night with Robert?" "Oh, John, it was terrible. All I could think about was you and Candide. She's so attractive and beautiful. I know I'll never be able to compete with her." You realize that you wouldn't have to worry about competition if you hadn't started this nonsense. She couldn't meet my eyes, but she nodded in agreement. "I think I can say for sure that you wouldn't feel so sorry if it were just you and Robert, and I was left sitting at home alone." She raised her eyes full of tears, then lowered them and nodded again. "I just don't know what to do. Part of me just wants to throw you on the sidelines and start over with someone new." Jane was openly crying now. I'm sure she was thinking about me with Candide. Then I look at you and I see the woman I married, the woman I fell in love with. I don't see an evil bitch but a stupid girl, and I hope, that there is a way back for us." Jane looked up, hope shining through her tears. "I'm going to change my clothes and go out for a while. While I'm gone, I think you should move your things to the guest room. We'll talk more when I get back. Please don't make me move, John. How can we be together again if we're apart? I need you now more than ever. You don't understand what's going on. It's not a fact that we'll be together again. Maybe you should have thought about how much you needed me before you started this," I said before going up to my bedroom. "John," she said, and I turned around. "I love you." I just nodded and left the house. I know it sounds cold, but I needed her to feel how shaky our marriage was. I went down to the Charles River and wandered along the shore, watching the rowers in their boats and sailboats dancing on the water. I was sitting on a bench when I came across several families with young children. I felt sad when I wondered if I would ever see the children Jane and I were talking about. I don't know how long I sat there, but as the sun went down, I started to feel cold. Taking a deep breath, I got to my feet and trudged home. When I entered the house, Jane was still sitting where I had left her. She looked at me, hopefully, but I just shook my head sadly, went up to my room and locked the door. I kicked off my shoes and stretched out on the bed fully dressed, covering my eyes with my hand. I don't know how long I lay there before I heard a soft knock on the door and a whisper, and after the second attempt, I heard her walk down the hall to the guest room. After making sure she went to bed, I took a quick shower and fell into a restless sleep. When I went downstairs, I found that Jane had prepared a hearty breakfast, and to my surprise I had a good appetite, although Jane was just picking at the food. "John," she said, "do you think we could try to see a psychologist? Consulting." I turned it over in my mind. I really didn't know much about counseling. Would they try to convince me to accept Jane's stupidity? If they try to do that, then I can just run away. Did I want to settle everything? One of the things I learned from my night with Candide was that our sex life had become boring and routine. Do I really want to go back to that? I was still angry that Jane had never come to me with complaints. I decided that I had enough love for Jane in my heart for now, and I didn't want to give up without a fight. "Okay, Jane, let's try to consult." She almost jumped out of her chair. "I don't need a counselor who wants to save our marriage. Maybe he can be saved, and maybe not. I will not tolerate any hidden intentions." I could tell she was disappointed. She must have been hoping for some new age hippie psychoanalyst who would agree with her "times have changed" philosophy. But she had no choice but to agree. The consultation was surprisingly effective. Jane had to see how her refusal to work with me actually affected her dissatisfaction with our sex life. And I realized that I needed to be more assertive. We talked more about what we want, what we need, and what we expect from our sex life. Even though our discussions helped with many of our problems, I couldn't shake off the feeling of betrayal, even though it wasn't completed. Jane, on the other hand, couldn't get past her worries about Candide. No matter how much I reassured her that I didn't love Candide and our date was just a rebound, she couldn't understand. Eventually, we agreed to get a divorce. Once it was finalized, I took some time to reflect on my life. Instead of contacting Candide right away, I booked a room at a bed and breakfast on the coast of Maine. It was off-season, so the weather wasn't perfect, but it matched how I felt. I just wanted some peace and quiet to figure out my next steps. When I returned, I called Candide. We went out to eat, and then she helped me get to bed, but it was more about feeling comforted than feeling passionate. The next morning, while we were lying in bed, I absent-mindedly played with her nipple. "What are you thinking about, John?" she asked. "I was thinking about how simple it would be to just ask you to stay with me forever," I replied. "But sometimes, the easy way isn't the best way." "Yes," I said, "we have a genuine connection." She smiled at me slyly. "Get your thoughts out of the gutter. I don't mean just the bed. I really like you, and I know that I can easily fall in love with you, but I do not know if this will be fair to both of us. My divorce is still very fresh and undigested, and I'm worried it might lead to a rebound. I think it would be better if we both saw each other for a while, as well as each other. I do not know how long this can last, and I will not ask you to wait until I come to my senses. I'd like to argue with you, but I'm afraid you're right," she said. "Although I really think that we should succeed, it's probably better to be sure than to regret later." We got out of bed, used the bathroom, took a separate shower, and then had a quiet breakfast. I was tempted to throw caution to the wind and forget about meeting others, and I think Candide would have agreed, but I was determined. We finished cleaning, she walked me to the door, and we hugged with tears in our eyes. "I think it's goodbye," she said. "No, I don't agree. Why don't we meet for dinner, say 2 weeks after Friday, just to check on how things are going?" "Okay," she said, kissed me on the cheek and led me out the door. The sound of the door closing was like the sound of a cell door, and I wasn't sure if I hadn't made the worst mistake of my life. I spent the rest of the week doubting my sanity. On Friday, I decided to join my friends for dinner and drinks. We were sitting in a corner booth at the back of the restaurant. I was facing the door. We were just finishing dessert when I saw her come in. Candide was with a tall, handsome guy. Who am I kidding? Of course he was tall and handsome. I was torn apart as to whether I should come over and say hello, but decided that this would not be consistent with our parting. I was disappointed by how quickly she seemed to replace me. I guess you can call me a coward because I waited until she went to the bathroom before throwing some cash on the table and quickly saying goodnight to my friends. I was angry at her for not waiting long to get back into the game, and even more angry at myself. It was something we both agreed to. One thing was for sure, I was going to make an appointment. I flatter myself that I'm a pretty good catch, and I didn't have any trouble making a date for next Friday night. Her name was Cheryl Thompson. She worked as a secretary for one of my clients, and in the past we had exchanged innocent flirtations. She knew that I was married, but readily agreed when I made it clear that I was divorced. I always thought Cheryl was attractive for business, but I wasn't ready for the vision that greeted me at her door, and I think my surprise was obvious. "I think I've prepared pretty well," she said. "That's an understatement. Do you look like you're ready to go?" "Yes, just let me put on my raincoat." I helped her put the cloak over her shoulders and we set off. Dinner was with the usual chatter on the first date, except for talking about my divorce. She was shocked by Jane's actions. I decided to put my cards on the table for coffee and dessert. "Cheryl, I don't want to lie to you. Before my divorce, I got involved with a woman, and after it was finalized, we got serious. We both worried about moving too fast and the risks involved in starting a new relationship, so we agreed to see other people for a while. I don't want you to think I'm just using you as a temporary fix," I told her. "I'm open to whatever happens next, wherever it takes us." Her laughter had a charming sound to it. "John, this is only our first date. I'm not expecting any promises, but I appreciate your honesty. Let's just take it easy and see where it goes," she said. After we got past that awkward conversation, we had a lovely date that ended with a warm kiss and plans for another date the following Saturday. Meanwhile, I had a dinner date with Candide on Friday, and I had no idea how it was going to happen. I took her hands and she was as beautiful as ever. We talked casually on the way to the restaurant, but as soon as we gave the waiter our orders, she became serious. "You know, I saw you." I just raised my eyebrows. "I was at dinner and saw you with your friends. I was going to come over and say hello, but when I came out of the bathroom, you were gone." I was a little confused. I know we said we could see other people, but seeing you with another guy so quickly made me feel a bit jealous. It's silly, I know, but John, you didn't need to feel jealous. Stefan was an old friend I hadn't seen in a while, and when he asked, I decided to take a break and have dinner with him. I'm sorry if it bothered you. No need to apologize. Any upset was just in my own head. In fact, it inspired me to get off my ass and ask someone out on a date. We had dinner last week. Now it was her turn to raise her eyebrows. Should I be jealous? She asked with a smile. Oh, I don't think so, although we have another date for tomorrow night. We both agree that there is no commitment. Just two people getting together to have a good time. That's sweet, she said with a wistful smile. You deserve to have a good time. We were saved from further awkward conversations by the arrival of our lunches, and the conversation turned to more pleasant topics. Do you want to go dancing? I asked, holding the car door open for her. No, I think it would be better if you took me home. She drove home quietly, looking out the window. We went to her door, kissed, maybe with a little more fervor than we intended, and gently pushed off from each other. Please stay in touch, John. I'll do that. Good night, Candide, I said, and hurriedly retreated to my car before trying to drag her inside. My date with Cheryl went well and our goodnight kiss was more heated with a little fondling. But we broke up anyway before things went too far. Although I talked to Candide about every week, our paths did not cross. I do not know if we subconsciously avoided each other or if it was just fate. I saw Cheryl a few more times and we actually ended up in bed and it was fun, but there was no spark. When we were lying in bed after the third night, Cheryl dropped a bomb on me. John, I think this should be the last time. What? I thought we were doing well. Oh, that's right. Maybe even too good. Now your words don't make sense. John, when we started, we said no commitment, and I said I wasn't looking for any commitment. I didn't have them, and I don't have them. But I'm developing feelings for you, and if we keep going, I think we can go somewhere I'm just not ready to go. I'd rather hurt you now before the feelings get too deep than later, when it really hurts you. I hope this makes sense. In a strange way it is so. I can't say it doesn't hurt, but I'll get over it. I got dressed, kissed her on the forehead, and headed for the door. "Good night, Cheryl." "Goodbye, John," she said with a sad smile, tears glistening in her eyes. Closing the door behind her, I considered my next move. After Cheryl, I started seeing other women. Some were just one-night flings, and some were short relationships, but none were as serious as Cheryl. Then, I realized what was missing in my life and decided to call Candide. "Hello," she answered. "Candide, it's me, John," I said, forgetting she had caller ID. "I don't know how you've been, but I'm not worried about other options anymore. I've had more rebounds than a pinball, and I'm ready to settle down. If you'll still have me, I want to come back home." There was silence on the other end, and I feared I had missed my chance. Jane did not leave the city in disgrace and did not live a lonely life surrounded by her cats. She certainly wasn't looking for a job in a Mexican brothel. While I wasn't really interested in knowing this, but mutual friends told me that she was dating, although there didn't seem to be anyone she was dating seriously. Candide wanted to invite Jane to the wedding. Although I wasn't sure if it was such a good idea, I didn't mind, but Jane refused, sending a nice gift. I was surprised when Candide struck up a casual friendship with Jane, meeting from time to time for coffee or shopping. It didn't bother me, although of course it was unusual. About 6 months after we got married, I returned home and found that Candide was dressed for going out. Oh, I thought, here we are again. Fortunately, my fears turned out to be unfounded. "Go change. Jane and I are meeting at Amelia's for dinner. Look, I know you two have become quite friendly, but don't you think this is a little too much?" "Don't worry, darling. My madness has a system." I knew I couldn't argue with her when she had an idea in her head, so I just shrugged and went to change. Jane was already waiting in place, and to call the situation awkward would be an understatement. Candide and Jane greeted each other with kisses on the cheek, as all women do, while I just stood there feeling awkward. None of us seemed to know what to do. Then Jane spoke up. "John, it's good to see you. You look good." "Thank you, Jane. You look good too." We were saved from more awkwardness when we were shown to our table. Candide stopped to say something to the man at the counter. "What's going on?" I asked when she caught up. "Don't worry. Everything's fine," she reassured me. But every husband knows that when his wife says nothing, it means something, and he should be worried. I had to play along and hope for the best. Jane sat on my right, and Candide sat across from me. Before we could order drinks, the host and Stefan approached our table. Candide stood up, gave him a friendly hug, and sat him down on my left opposite Jane, and her insidious plan became obvious. While I was relieved that my worst fears turned out to be unfounded, this evening really had the makings of a disaster. Fortunately, Jane and Stefan seemed to get along. The conversation flowed smoothly throughout the dinner, and by all accounts, we were like 4 old friends. Too soon it seemed. It was time to leave. Stefan and I split the check, and while Candide and I were leaving, Jane and Stefan decided to continue the evening at the restaurant bar. Candide was so cocky, but I couldn't get mad. Although it may not be for long, they clearly got off to a good start. I made amends for underestimating her by giving her a sensual massage and then worshipping at her altar, giving her 3 orgasms before giving her a gentle kiss. We maintained cordial, albeit distant, relationships with Jane and Stefan. We hardly ever chatted as couples, but we often hung out together in a group. It seems like they have a strong relationship. Jane doesn't seem to need to spice things up anymore. We wish them all the best. Candide and I couldn't be happier, even though the baby kicking keeps her up at night. Second story. GF of 3 years cheated on me. So, I'm going to try and make this sort of short, but it definitely isn't sweet. 3 years ago, I was in the army. One of the leaves I took, I met up with a girl I knew from high school. We hit it off and started doing long distance. After a deployment, and a year of long distance, she decided to move in with me in Kansas where I was stationed. She couldn't handle another year of long distance waiting for me to get out of the army. Since she moved to KS, things between us have been rough. While I was away on deployment, something strange happened. She sent me messages from a fake number, pretending to be someone I knew, and flirting with me a lot. It was messed up, but I didn't handle it well. Then, a few days later, I found out she went on a date with someone from her college who had a crush on her for a long time. She says nothing happened between them, but she was upset about what I said in the texts. I'm not sure if I believe her because I just found out something even worse after almost 2 years of not knowing. Fast forward a year, our relationship is rocky. I am dealing with the passing of my father that happened while I was deployed. This set me to have pretty bad anxiety and depression. This put a toll on my motivation to do things and how I subsequently treated her. She says she didn't feel like woman. We had sex 2-3 times a week, which didn't seem like this crazy low number, but in her mind it wasn't enough. I had issues showing constant affection, and sometimes I just didn't want to go out. I would much rather stay in and watch Netflix. Maybe I'm a homebody at heart. I wanted nothing more than to just move back home and take care of my mom. After I left the army in April, we stayed in Kansas for about 9 months so she could finish college. We moved back to our hometown later. One day, I needed to use her iPad for homework and ended up checking her messages with her best friend. I don't know why I did it. I found texts where she talked about hooking up with someone during a drill weekend in October. While I was at home, she went out with some friends to a bar. A guy there was hitting on her, and she talked to him about our relationship, seeking advice. She felt like he understood her. They left the bar. She went to bed and sent me a selfie from there. Later, the guy texted her to come to his hotel, and they ended up having sex. I got all the details. She described the sex over text with her friend. Killed me. I felt like I was going to throw up all over the place. So much pain. I read all of it. The shape of his junk, how she felt, and the fact that he got an erectile dysfunction and didn't finish. I read the messages she had with him as well. Now she says she thought they were just going to talk, which is complete BS. This is a blatant booty call that she obliged with seemingly no hesitation. To sum it up, for 5 months I didn't know about what happened, and during that time, our relationship improved a lot. I was able to move back and help my mom, which made me feel better. But then I found out about what happened, and everything started going downhill. She feels really sad and sorry. She's been trying very hard to make things right. I've never seen her put in so much effort before. She's apologized for cheating and for how she treated me in Kansas. It seems like she's trying to change her perspective on everything, but I can't stop thinking about another man being able to do this to someone I love so much. It makes me feel disgusted. Our relationship is complicated right now. I found out about this a week and a half ago, and I told her I need time to think about whether I want to stay together. I really need advice. If you read this whole thing, thank you. Thanks for joining us on this chapter of Relation Tales. If you were moved by these stories, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Don't miss out on the upcoming emotional roller coaster of relationships. Your support means the world, and we can't wait to share more compelling tales with you. Until next time, remember, every relationship has a story worth telling. See you soon.